brushing only. So, tonight we are traveling on up to New Hampshire. Shout out to all my friends in New Hampshire. This is the case of Maura Murray from 2004. There is a huge amount of information on this case out there. Tons of YouTube videos, documentaries, articles, books, you name it. So, if you are interested in finding out more, after you watch this video, there is a lot out there. You can fall down a very, very deep rabbit hole. So, let's get right to it. Maura Murray was born on May 4th, 1982, in a small town near Boston called Hanson, Massachusetts. Her parents were Fred and Lori Murray, and she was one of 5 children. She was the youngest. She was raised in an Irish Catholic family, and when she was just 6 years old, her parents divorced. She lived with her mother, but always remained extremely close with her father. I mean, they had a really tight bond. He referred to her as his buddy. So, she had a very tight group of 7 friends from her childhood that she would continue to stay in close contact with even after she left her hometown and went away to college, which we'll get to. But this group would see each other through thick and thin, and she would never hesitate to share with them any problems that she might be having. She has been described as a multifaceted person. Sometimes she was serious, sometimes she was very funny, but she was very smart, and she was a fun-loving and adventurous person. There was one example of a time in high school when, without telling anyone, she skipped school and took a train to Boston for the day. All her friends were wondering where she was because she wasn't in school, and they hadn't heard from her. That was odd. But when she got back from Boston, she told them she had just gone on a she was there for 3 semesters. Now, what happened at that point to make her leave was she had been caught stealing makeup, it was said, from the Fort Knox gift shop. And she was pushed to withdraw rather than, be thrown out, I suppose. So she transferred to the University of Massachusetts at Amherst, which we will refer to as UMass, Amherst or UMass. And she switched majors. She entered their nursing program, and she continued to run track and cross country. Now, while she had been at West Point, she met a guy named Billy Roush. That was in 2001. And they began dating. They continued a long-distance relationship when she transferred to UMass. And he ultimately would be stationed in Oklahoma at Fort Sill. Now, she was very successful at UMass as well. She made it onto the dean's list. She was extremely busy. She had 2 part-time jobs. She had to go to classes. She had to study. She had to attend nursing clinicals, meaning travel around and do assistant nursing work to learn to become a nurse. Now, in November of 2003, while she was still at UMass, she was caught using a stolen credit card. She had been doing it repeatedly to order food. Specifically, it was said Domino's, but there might have been other places. And the campus police set up a sting operation to find out who was doing it. And she was caught red-handed when the food was delivered to her. So she admitted that she had done it because it was obvious. And she was told that all charges would be dismissed if she could maintain good behavior for 3 months, which would begin in December of 2003. So a couple of months later, she still hadn't finished the 3 months. But she was 21, and it was February 5th, 2004. She was at work. She did a campus security job, part-time. And she was on the phone with her older sister, Kathleen. And it was around 10:30 p.m. She started crying, and when her supervisor came over to her desk, the supervisor said that Maura was, quote, just completely zoned out, no reaction at all. She was unresponsive, end quote. So the supervisor walked Maura back to her dorm room, and when she asked her what was wrong, Maura finally just said, quote, my sister, end quote. That was all she would or could say. And later, her sister would tell the public that the conversation was about the fact that Kathleen, who was an alcoholic, had just gotten out of rehab. She was picked up by her fiancé, who had driven her right to few days later, on Saturday, February 7th, Maura's father, Fred, visited her at school, which he often did. He came regularly to spend time with her. And they went car shopping because her car was in really bad shape. So he was going to get her a new, probably used car, I think. So they went and they picked one out, and they were going to pick it up the following weekend, so they didn't take it home with them. After that, they went out for dinner at a brew pub in town. They brought one of Maura's college friends. They had a nice time, no issues. Afterwards, they stopped at a liquor store together to get something to drink for later. Then Maura's father returned to his motel room, and Maura borrowed her father's car. She went back to the dorms, and she went to a dorm party where reportedly she had a bit to drink. At 2:30 a.m. the next morning, which was then Sunday, February 8th, she was ready to leave the party, and her friends all said, don't leave in the car, just stay in the dorms. She had a dorm room, but she said no, she was going back to the motel to stay with her father, and she wouldn't take no for an answer, and she left in his car. But unfortunately, she got into an accident with his car. It was 3:30 a.m. and she struck a guardrail, causing almost $10,000 worth of damage to his car. So the police came, they, took an accident report. It was said that they did not do a field sobriety test, so there was no record of that. The tow truck driver dropped Maura back at her father's motel room, and at about 4:49 a.m. she called her boyfriend Billy from her father's phone, not hers. We don't know why. And according to him, they talked about her having just gotten into the accident. So anyway, that morning, Fred, her father, called the car insurance company and found out it would be covered. So he told her not to, be too upset about it, but she was a bit upset, obviously. He rented a car for himself, dropped her off at her dorm, and headed back to Connecticut where he worked. At 11:30 that same night, Fred called Maura to tell her to get some accident forms from the DMV over there. And he said they would talk again Monday night to fill out the forms together on the phone. So, after midnight that night, now it was February 9th, Monday, February 9th after midnight, she went on MapQuest on her computer to look for directions to the Berkshires and Burlington, Vermont. School was canceled that day due to a snowstorm, and at 1 o'clock, she emailed her boyfriend, quote, "I love you more, stud. I got your messages, but honestly, I didn't feel like talking too much of anyone. I promise to call today though. Love you, Maura," end quote. She also made a call to ask about renting a condo, like a vacation condo kind of thing, at the Bartlett, New Hampshire Condo Association. Her family had vacationed there recently in the past. That call lasted 10 minutes, and the owner did not wind up renting to her, though. why she had lied when they discussed it later, that is. Because it wasn't like her to lie. But in truth, we have her using fraudulent credit cards, her stealing from a Fort Knox store, and now her lying about a death in the family. I'm not judging her, I'm just listing the details back for you. So anyway, after she sent that email to her work supervisor, at 2:05 she called a automated phone number which gives you information about hotels in Stowe, Vermont. The call lasted 5 minutes, but she booked nothing because the line wasn't working at the time for anyone. Like, nobody was able to book anything at that time through that automated system for whatever reason. At 2:18 p.m., she called her boyfriend and left a message saying they would talk later. That lasted 1 minute. So she packed up her car. She brought clothing, toiletries, college textbooks, and birth control pills. When her room was searched later on, campus police found that most of her belongings were in boxes, and art was removed from the walls. Now, they said that it had been packed between Sunday night and Monday morning, but I had read somewhere that she had just never unpacked it from when she arrived for the start of that semester, so we don't know. Okay. On top of these boxes, she had left a printed email to her boyfriend which indicated there was trouble in the relationship, but no one discloses that letter to us, so I don't know exactly what it said. Then at 3:30 p.m., she drove off campus in her black 1996 Saturn sedan. At 3:40, she went to her ATM and took out $280, which was pretty much all she had in that account. And later, they looked at closed circuit footage, and she was alone when she made that withdrawal. Then she went to a nearby liquor store, also alone, and bought $40 worth of alcohol, including Bailey's Irish Cream, Kahlua, vodka, and a box of Franzia red wine. It was said that the ingredients that she bought, not including the red wine, were what you would use to make a White Russian. After that, she went to the DMV and picked up the accident forms that her father requested. She left town between 4 and 5 on Interstate 91 North, and she called to check her voicemail at 4:37 p.m. That was the last ever recorded use of her cell phone. And there is no evidence that she ever told anyone where she was headed, or if she even knew. Sometime after 7 p.m., it's still Monday, February 9th, she was in Woodsville, New Hampshire, and a resident heard a loud thud outside. She looked out the window and she saw Maura's car up against a snowbank along Route 112, which is also known as Wild Amanusuk Road. I apologize if I mispronounced it, which I surely did. So her car was pointing west on the eastbound side, so her car was facing in the wrong direction. At 7:27 p.m., this woman reported the accident to noticed she was not bleeding or visibly injured, but she was shaken up, she was shivering. He offered to call for help. But she said, no, I already called AAA, so please don't call anyone. Now he knew that there was no cell service in that area, so he didn't really think that her call went through. Plus, AAA never had any record of that. So he went home and called the police himself to report the accident, and his call was received at 7:43 p.m. Now, according to the official police log, at 7:46, a Haverhill police officer arrived at the scene. But the driver was not there, so Maura was not there, just the car. No one was inside or around the car. The car had hit a tree on the driver's side of the car, which damaged the left headlight and pushed the car's radiator into the fan, rendering it inoperable. The windshield was cracked on the driver's side and both airbags had deployed. And the car was locked, suggesting that she had voluntarily left the car and locked it behind her. Inside and outside the car, there were red stains that looked like red wine. Because remember, she bought a box of red wine. The officer found an empty beer bottle and a damaged box of Franzia red wine on the backseat. He also found makeup, diamond jewelry, driving directions to Burlington, Vermont, Maura's favorite stuffed animal, and her favorite book called Not Without Peril, which was a book about misadventures, like true stories of people who had climbed the White Mountains in New Hampshire and all the things that had gone wrong. Her father would later talk about the book, saying she loved the book. They had done some of the trails themselves, and even though it was about misadventures and some people died, he said it was an uplifting book and didn't indicate anything. Now, missing from the car were Maura's debit card, credit cards, and cell phone, which have never been found. And the police reported that some of the bottles of liquor that she had bought that day were also missing, so perhaps she took them with her, as well as her cell phone and debit and credit cards. So police looked up the vehicle, and they realized it belonged to Maura Murray, and they treated her as a missing person because they felt that she wanted to disappear. There were no signs of any foul play, really. But they continued to look around that evening. The responding officer and the bus driver searched the area. Just before 8 p.m., EMS and a fire truck came to clear the scene, and by 8:49 the car had been towed to a local garage. And by 9:30 p.m. the responding officer left. He didn't find anything and he left. Now they had noticed that a rag had been placed in her muffler pipe. Now her father would later explain that he told her to put a rag in there because her muffler was so damaged, there were like holes in the tailpipe, and he said that that would somehow help to control the smoke. So authorities referred to Maura as simply, quote, missing at 12 p.m. the next day, which was February 10th. And a, quote, be on the lookout report was issued for her. They left a working and never got the message. But I guess they called her mother as well, because at 5 p.m. Maura's older sister contacted Fred to tell him what had happened. And then he contacted the police and was told that if she was not reported safe by the next morning, the New Hampshire Fish and Game Department would start a search. Now, the next day, on February 11th, Fred arrived at the break of dawn in Haverhill. Maura's mother could not come due to an injury to her ankle, but some other members of the family came. And at 8 a.m., the New Hampshire Fish and Game, the Murrays, and others began to search. They did a huge search. A police dog tracked the scent from one of Maura's gloves 100 yards east of where her car was, but then he lost the scent, so they believed that she must have gotten into a car at that point. And there were no tracks because it had been snowing. At 5 p.m. that day, Maura's boyfriend Billy and his parents arrived to also help. He was interrogated in private and then also with his parents. At 7 p.m., the police said they believed that Maura had come to the area to run away or to take her own life. But her family and friends did not believe that this is what happened. While her boyfriend Billy was on the airplane flying to Haverhill, he had gotten a voicemail, and when he played it after he got off the airplane, he believed it was Maura. It was just the sound of a woman sobbing and like shivering in the cold, and that was it. The number was traced back to an AT&T calling card, and Billy's mother said that she had bought Maura 2 AT&T calling cards a few months back before Maura had a cell phone, and so she believed that that was Maura calling using the calling card. But that was not proven. The next day, on February 12th, Maura's father, Fred, and her boyfriend, Billy, held a press conference in Bethlehem, New Hampshire, and then the next day, February 13th, the coverage was published. So they were trying to get the word out there to look for her. At 3:05 p.m. on the 13th, the police reported that she was, quote, listed as endangered and possibly suicidal. They also said that she was intoxicated at the crash site, although they didn't know that for sure, they assumed it. And the bus driver said she didn't seem intoxicated when he saw her. A week after her disappearance, her father and boyfriend were interviewed by CNN, and they expanded their search into Vermont because authorities in Vermont had not even been informed of her disappearance. But they felt maybe she was there because she had looked to travel to Vermont. 10 days after she disappeared, the FBI got involved, and the Haverhill police chief announced that the search was now nationwide. The New Hampshire Fish and Game conducted a second ground and air search using helicopter with thermal imaging camera tracking dogs and cadaver dog. whatever they could do there. But Fred returned nearly every weekend to continue searching, and he felt some level of guilt for having not gotten her the new car sooner. Also, in March of 2004, there was another disappearance of a young woman named Brianna Maitland in Montgomery, Vermont, 66 miles away from where Maura went missing. And lots of people thought there was a connection, but no connection was ever made officially. In a press release, authorities said that they believed that, quote, Maura was headed for an unknown destination and may have accepted a ride in order to continue to that location. They said they had no evidence that any crime had been committed, and they dismissed the possibility of a serial killer being involved. And there, of course, were many, many sightings of Maura, or what people thought was Maura, but none of those sightings ever turned into anything legitimate. In late 2004, a man gave Fred a rusty knife that belonged to his brother. The brother had a criminal past and lived less than a mile away from where Maura disappeared. He said that his brother and his brother's girlfriend had acted very strangely after Maura went missing, and he believed that this knife was used to kill Maura by his brother. But the family members of this man, the man who gave the knife to Fred, his family members said that he made up the whole story because he hoped to get reward money, and that he had a history of drug use. About 2 years later, in October of 2006, volunteers went on a 2-day search within a few miles of where Maura's car was found, and in the closet of a house 1 mile from the crash site, cadaver dogs went, quote, bonkers, possibly identifying human remains. Now, this house was previously owned by the brother of the man who had given the knife to Fred. A sample of the carpet from that home was sent to the New Hampshire State Police, but the results were never released to the public. And then, many years later, in February of 2019, the 15th anniversary of Maura's disappearance, Fred stated to the public that he believes his daughter is dead, and he has suspicions about the nearby house that the cadaver dogs had responded to. And he said, quote, "That's my daughter, I do believe," end quote. 2 months later, in April of 2019, an excavation was done within the basement of that house. Now, they had wanted to search it more thoroughly in the past, but the owners at the time wouldn't allow it. Possibly because they just didn't want their house messed up. I don't really know. But there were new owners now, and they allowed it. So the excavation found nothing of interest. Now, Maura's disappearance has been cited as, quote, the first crime mystery of the social media age, end quote. In 2014, a writer named Bill Jensen, who wrote for Boston Magazine, said the following: "Now, at least online, it often seems as there's no such thing as a cold case. But when Maura Murray disappeared, the social web was in its infancy. of her case as a parable about the evolution of online sleuthing. He went on to say, quote, "On the internet, Maura's disappearance is the perfect obsession, a puzzle of clues that offers a tantalizing illusion. If the right armchair detective connects the right dots, maybe the unsolvable can be solved. And so every day the case attracts new recruits, analyzing and dissecting and reconstructing the details of her story with a Warren Commission-like fervor." And that is the case. What are your thoughts? I will share some theories and then my own theory. So, there are lots of theories, but the main ones are, number one, not in any particular order, she took her own life. So, the thing is, people had said she was not depressed. She had everything going on. She did not have a reason to die. She had brought her textbooks in the car, which meant she was going to study. She had brought birth control pills, which, well, you know what that means. And she was searching for a hotel, as if she was going on vacation. And she had just picked up forms from the DMV. Who picks up forms from the DMV if they don't intend on filling them out in the future? But on the other hand, she was upset. She had just had an accident with her father's car. And now there was this accident. So maybe it was she hadn't really intended on taking her life until the second accident. Like she hadn't planned it until that moment. And there was also the story about a hit and run accident which had happened one day before Maura's father came, you know, when they went to search for cars, when they went shopping for a car. There was a hit and run the day before. So in February of 2004. No one ever knew who did it, but it was on campus or in the area, and it was a student who got hit and he was critically injured. So some people are saying maybe it was Maura and she was really upset about it. And he survived ultimately, but maybe she didn't know if he was going to survive. Also, maybe everyone did not really know what was really happening with Maura's mental health, you know? Like, she was using fraudulent credit cards she had stolen in the past. Maybe there was something developing that people just weren't aware of, maybe. But the question that I always have with that is, if she took her life, where was her body? I mean, they searched pretty hard. Right away, you know, where was her body? Okay, so the next theory is that she left her car, got lost or hurt, and succumbed to the elements. You know, meaning it was freezing cold, okay? And they're animals, I suppose, but more likely the freezing cold could have gotten to her. So, it's thought that maybe, you know, as she was standing there outside her car, she was thinking, I don't want to be here when the police come because I've been drinking. And I'm supposed to be good for 3 months, right? If I want the other charge to be dismissed. So I need to disappear, you know, not permanently, but I need to get out of here because I don't want them to give me a breathalyzer. So she may have wandered, you know, away to kind of hide or get away, and then maybe she got lost and froze to death. So once again, if that happened, where did her body go? So then the next theory is obviously that she was the victim of foul play. Now remember the rag in her tailpipe. So her father explained it away, but some people have said that if you put somebody purposely put the rag in her tailpipe and then followed her in hopes that her car would break down and then they could do something to her, right? So, I don't know. But I'm thinking, did her car even stall? I got the sense that there wasn't a stall, but just a crash. I mean, I don't know. And of course, a very popular theory is that, as she was standing outside of her car, hoping to get away from the scene, so because of her alcohol consumption, that somebody passed by in a car and offered her a ride to wherever. And they seemed trustworthy to her, and so she got into the car with them voluntarily after locking her door and taking, just a few things like her cell phone and her credit cards and debit cards and the alcohol bottles. Maybe she offered to give them to the person in exchange for the ride, or who knows. So, it's believed that that person or persons ultimately took her life and somehow got rid of her body, maybe drove very far, or just somewhere that was never searched to get rid of her body. And maybe that was the brother, the guy who lived in that house right there, within a mile of the site. It could have been him. We don't really know. So this would have been just her being at the wrong place at the wrong time. Just a random crime of opportunity. So then there's also the theory that she left to start a new life. And that always seems like an odd way to start a new life. Just to leave your loved ones wondering forever what happened to you, and to have never contacted anyone even after all these years have passed. It just doesn't seem that likely. But could it have been that her boyfriend was so abusive that she feared him and had to just disappear? Remember, the authorities said there was an email that suggested they had relationship problems. And as it turns out, in 2019, her boyfriend, who had become an army major, his name she didn't feel too good about it, and she didn't put in too much effort to, really make this charge stick, and nothing seemed to come of it. But years later, she heard about his connection to the Maura Murray case, and she heard that other women were stating that Bill was sometimes erratic and violent to them, so she decided to report it again. And she was successful because he pled guilty in July of 2022, but the charge was brought down to misdemeanor simple assault. He was 42 at that time. He was sentenced to 180 days of jail, but the sentence was suspended, so he would never have to spend any time in jail. So, long story short, does this mean that he had something to do with Maura's disappearance? Well, it could support the fact that she was trying to get away from him, but he could just be a really bad guy, but haven't had nothing to do with her disappearance. We don't know. Now also, Maura's track coach, who was actually a graduate assistant in his early 20s, he had admitted to having had an affair with her at the time. But Maura's sister later said that it was like a one-time kind of thing. It wasn't like an ongoing relationship, and he was around her same age. So this track coach said that she had told him that her boyfriend Billy was very controlling. So more information to support Billy being controlling. Alright, so now what do I think? And I am no expert, okay? But now I hope she's alive and well. Do I think she is? No, but of course I hope she is. Now if I had to guess, I would say that it was random foul play, that somebody saw her standing alone in the cold night and offered her a ride, and she took it because she didn't want to do a breathalyzer. She left with the person who probably SA'd and then killed her and got rid of her remains like I discussed earlier. And the phone call that Billy had received from a woman who was just crying and shivering, I mean, it could have been her. I don't know who else it could be. But if she had a calling card and she got to a phone, why would she call Billy and then just cry in the, on the message? Why wouldn't she call 911 or something? I mean, the fact that she didn't want to take a breathalyzer would kind of be unimportant at that point, right? When it was a life or death situation. So that is what I think probably happened to her. But I still want to know, where was she going and why? Like if we have decided that she was a victim of foul play, okay, but where was she headed and why didn't she tell anyone? I mean, maybe she was just so overcome with everything going on in her life. She was so busy, she had so much to do, her work, her school, she had problems with her boyfriend, she had had a car accident, she had those criminal charges, pending about the fraudulent credit cards. Just a lot of stress, and maybe she just wanted to get away from it all. And the fact that she brought birth control pills could have just been there, she could have just already had it in her car, who said that how do they know she just brought it specially in the car that day? So, yeah, maybe she just